Hey there and welcome back to Don't Open That Door. Come along with our triumvirate of terror as we descend into darkness, hurtle into horror, and plunge into peril. If you're into frescoes, but not queso, you're in the right place. I'm Justin, and Capcom used to be so good.
I'm Nico, and I'm sorry for this.
Ugh.
I'm Dan, and as the engineer, I guess I have to tune that.
And today, we're here to review Sweet Home, from 1989 that is. This one was directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa, starring Nobuko Miyamoto as Akiko, Shingo Yamashiro as Kazuo, Noko as Emi, Fukumi Kuroda as Asuka, Ichiro Furutachi as Ryo, and Juzo Itami as Yamamura. I don't think I slaughtered those names. So we open with the television crew as they attempt to gain access to an abandoned mansion that used to belong to a famous painter. You see, they think there are some undiscovered works of art still in the mansion, and they want to feature them. The village authorities are hesitant at first, mainly due to rumors of the mansion being haunted, but then they hatch a plan to use the TV crew as guinea pigs and let them go to the mansion. If they live, great. And if they die, well, then the mansion's confirmed haunted. And c'est la vie. I think, there's one guy I know who definitely would have this mindset. Nico, what happens next?
Who the fuck is you talking to right now? Because that is not me, bro. Anyway, so the TV crew make their way to the mansion, and we meet Kazuo, the director, and his daughter, Emi. There's a bit of attraction in this crew, as Kazuo has a thing for Akiko, the producer, but they have a kind of will they, won't they thing going on. Rounding out the rest of the crew are Ryo, the camera guy, and Asuka, the host of the program and best girl. Things start off pretty good as the crew finds some lost art and they go ahead begin restoring it.
Well, Dan is going to have to restore that guitar part you just played, so why don't you go ahead and hit me with the rest of this? What happens next?
Hey, I said I was sorry.
So unfortunately, things take a turn for the worse, just like that guitar part did. Ryo accidentally knocks over a memorial stone, more on that later, and Asuka gets possessed and keeps asking for her baby back ribs. Not even going to correct that. The crew break for the night and turn in, but Asuka loses it and digs up a baby's corpse. More on that later. The next morning, Akiko goes to get some gas and ends up saving a dude's life. She tells the gas station dude that she's out working at the old haunted-ass mansion and leaves. They also discover the dug-up baby and rebury it back, because, that's what you do.
Indeed. Unfortunately, Asuka keeps tripping out, and Akiko begins to get a bad feeling about this entire thing. So she suggests they leave, and take Asuka to a hospital. Only problem is that their car has this issue in the wiring. On top of that, Emi starts to see shadows move, and she runs out of the house. She tells everyone what she saw, and the crew go to investigate. Note for the audience, this is a bad idea. Ryo gets incinerated and cut in half by the evil shadow in the house. Surprisingly, he actually doesn't die from that. Instead, he manages to make it to Asuka, who then beats him to death with a wrench. Asuka dies soon thereafter as she is struck by a falling axe. Nico, I don't even think you would have an axe, but you probably have what happens next.
It's true. So gas station dude, aka Yamamura, shows up at this point, and he helps the remaining members of the TV crew look for their coworkers, who they then find dead. So good job on that search, I guess. The shadow then reappears and kidnaps Emi. This happens more than once. Gas station dude decides to break out some lore and says that the shadow is the spirit of the woman who used to live in this house. She accidentally incinerated her child, and then she lost her mind and started kidnapping and incinerating children in the village, and she eventually incinerated herself too. He, Yamamura, leads Kazuo and Akiko into the basement and is then incinerated himself, but manages to retrieve Emi nonetheless. This is only temporary, though, as, again, Emi is kidnapped once more, and Kazuo and Akiko venture into the mansion to save her.
All right, I've had enough of this nonsense, Dan. You got to close this out correct, bro. How's it end?
Well, Kazuo is off doing his own thing because fuck everyone else. So Akiko decides she has to be the one to save Emmy. She puts on Emmy's mother's old dress and digs back up the dead baby back ribs. She begs the shadow to give her back Emmy and says that she's a mother too, so she should understand. The shadow initially gives up Emmy, but then transforms into a horrifying demon. Emmy hands the monster the dead baby, and it dissipates, having been pacified. The monster does, not the baby. The movie ends with Emmy, Kazuo, and Akiko getting the hell out of the mansion, and afterwards, it crumbles. The end.
All right, well, we got to do some talking about this film. Nico, lead off here. How does this one sound?
I really like the sound of this one. I really, really did. It's got a very upbeat sort of soundtrack for most of the way, and a lot of it is very similar to how Hausu sounds, which makes sense given that they're both Japanese, but they both
Hey,
You know,
yo! You
I'm
know,
just playing. I'm just playing. No, but given their sort of like more whimsical nature, I think that was more of what I was going for there. Anyway,
You know, they're both haunted house stories. There's a few different things there.
no, but in all seriousness, this has a much more whimsical feel than the events in the movie might necessarily suggest. And the performances, while I think almost, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but I feel like a whole lot of this was ADR.
Oh, I'm sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, even though there was a whole lot of that, I don't think the movie suffered for it, and the actors did a good job portraying everything that was going on.
right on. I will say that one thing that I thought was interesting is, to me, I thought that everything sounded good, but I almost wanted a bit more scary fare, if there is. There's a ton of whimsical fare in this, which I was a little confused at, and more on that down the road, I think. But Dan, what's your thoughts on the sound?
I don't really have much else to say aside from I enjoyed the orchestral soundtrack. I thought it was cool, whimsical, like the other two of you have said, but I thought it was kind of fun. Some of the tracks were a little bit of a bop.
All right, well, why don't we change the wiring tactics here and go to how it looked, Dan? How's it look?
I thought it looked pretty good. I enjoyed, was it Rio's death when he kind of
Yeah.
like incinerates, and you know they do the whole like 80s kind of like speed up the film a little bit and like have him disintegrate and you know his face cave in and become a skeleton and stuff, and the skeleton got knocked over. You know, that was kind of cool. Sorry, did I say Rio was the one?
Yeah,
who-
I know you meant Yamamura,
No,
right?
yeah, Yamamura is what I meant. Yeah, when he gets
Yeah.
sped up, incinerated. But I also liked watching Rio get incinerated in half. That was kind of cool.
Yeah.
I actually thought that was pretty gruesome too. It was a lot seeing him like crawling around with his like entrails pouring out.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty metal. Nico, what'd you think about the looks?
So I think the movie looks both bad and good. So in terms of how we access this, we weren't able to find any real like legitimate source for this like streaming anywhere. So we ended up watching this from a rip that someone took years and years and years ago. And it is serviceable. But despite that, and perhaps in spite of that, I'm really pleased with some of the practical effects and the way that they really illustrated a lot of the gore that was happening on screen. Minimal though it was, to your point, Justin. I, in particular, also really liked the scene where Yamamura was getting sort of like disintegrated. And I was tickled in that scene when they were still just like yelling out after him when he is clearly already
Yeah.
just bones. It's like, he's gone, y'all. You gotta dip.
No more Yamamura to talk to anymore.
I don't know if this is like under looks or what, but there's a scene where Yamamura sings a song and then crushes a glass bottle of alcohol, but it doesn't
Like it's
shatter.
made of plastic.
Well, that's what I was like, yeah, wait a second. If it was plastic, then yeah, it would have been super easy to crush. Or if it was glass, it wouldn't have been crushed like that. Either way, Yamamura's got some kind of superpowers, and they just
He's
go on
a
from
fucking
there.
alchemist from Full Metal and can just like transmute the physical properties.
Yeah, I didn't get that. And the fact that he was also like singing a song that sounds like it comes from an old 80s Japanese show, I didn't know what was going on. Like, it almost sounded like he was singing the theme to like Zeo Ranger or some shit like that. But either way, let's go ahead now and get down to brass tacks. First and foremost, Nico, you mentioned that it was very difficult to try and find a legitimate release of this film. This is probably why. I want to get your guys' take on this. So this movie basically was released in theaters, right? As you would expect movies to come out in theaters.
Certainly.
However, after the movie, the producer, Juzo Itami, he reshot and re-edited parts of the film for the home studio and TV release. Sorry, home video and TV release. Now, at that point, the director Kurosawa got pissed and he sued them, right? He sued Itami and I guess his production studio, and he lost the lawsuit. So Itami was actually able to put out the re-edited film. What we saw is the re-edited film.
Wow.
This is a quote that the movie has been called, quote, more Itami's film than Kurosawa's. And the original film, this is per Wikipedia and one or two other places I looked, the original is just not available.
Wow. Just like completely lost media.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the only version of the film that exists is the 1989 release from VHS and Laserdisc. The version that we watched was a cleanup effort of 3 Laserdiscs that a group did to try and get the best possible quality of the movie they could.
Wow.
Because there just is no release of this movie.
Hats off to the team then. Y'all did a really great job with what you had. That's impressive work.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. I wonder how much you think changed if he was that pissed he fucking sued him.
Yeah, I got to imagine that it must have been a complete tonal difference. Like maybe the original was more gory.
I don't know, but another thing that kind of strikes me is, again, the dude who changed it was Yamamura. So I don't know if he even made himself more big and more present in the movie than maybe he was meant to be. Who knows?
Yeah, he was probably just some like passing character just in the one scene at the gas station. He's like,
Yeah.
I want to be the main character of this shit. I want to be
I'm
the
glad
hero."
he's in it. Like he kind of makes the movie for me personally. Like I think he's probably my favorite character, and just like the way that he so forcefully just handles every scene that he's in. He just eats up the screen.
And then he gets like punished.
Yeah, it's great.
Now, I guess I want to ask you too, the tone of this movie. How would you describe the tone?
I think it's all over the place. And I think to take a word from Nico's vocab, it's discordant.
Oh,
It's just kind of like
Okay.
we mentioned, like
Like the guitar part from earlier.
yeah, exactly like that. The soundtrack, like we've said a million times, is pretty whimsical. But then you have a couple parts that are a little like gruesome, like when he gets incinerated in half and everything. But then there's also this like weird, like pseudo comedy parts, not quite comedy, but like borderline, and like some drama kind of stuff a little bit. I don't know. It's to me, it was just kind of all over the place. And that is one issue that I had with the film.
indeed, I would agree. To take a word from like an application on my computer, it was discordant. Like, I think that on the whole, Kazuo probably is like the person who personifies this the most, because he's like, Akiko's like, I think something's wrong. We can get the fuck out of here. And then he's like, woman, get you don't know what you're talking about.
Kind of, yeah.
And then like 5 minutes later, he's like, wait, you think something's wrong? And then like he's crying like a bitch, and then not crying, but like he's like kind of a coward. And then I need lights. And then all of a sudden he's like, listen to me, Akiko. I've grown a backbone now. I'm going back in for Emmy. And don't come back for me either. But if I do manage to make it out, just know that I'll. And they both,
Instantly fuck.
no, they just like, they reach out to hold each other's hands, but it's not smooth. So they both just kind of like interlock
It's
fingers.
not
in
like the ocean under the moon.
No, It's weird, man. Like they squiggly finger each other real quick, and then
You remember Rocket Power? The woogity woogity
that's what it kind of looks like.
woogity. Yeah.
But then, like, he goes into the house and he's going to be like a hero on the mission, except not. He totally fails.
Isn't it like almost instantly too?
Yeah, and then at the end, they think he's dead, but then he comes out of a closet like, what's good? It's not even a closet. It's like a fucking thing you put like a wardrobe.
Cabinet wardrobe.
Wardrobe or some shit.
Yeah, he's like, I'm okay, guys. I'm like, man, shut the fuck up. So, yeah, that's my take on the tone. Nico, I talked for a while, but you got something?
I think the way that I would describe the tone is campy. It's very, very silly, but I also feel that it's somewhat self-aware because a lot of this movie is kind of absurd, you know? We've got, oh, the shadows are coming after us. There's big old hands on the walls. It's reaching towards us, and every time it goes by, a light extinguishes. Like it's the fucking Mario Party minigame where you're like scootering down Luigi's Mansion while Boo's chasing after you. That's basically what that scene was. But at the same time, I also really like the display they put on here with the more fiendish aspects of it. I think the really grotesque manifestation of what's her face, I can't remember, but the main enemy antagonist San, when she's like really about to snatch victory from our protagonists, and it just looks really, really monstrous. And I think they did a really good job with the practical effects when they were on screen. That sort of like contributes to that sort of balance that camp has between like silly yet also more theatrical.
Fair. Now, we like video games on this podcast occasionally. Yeah. And believe it or not, this movie, now follow me on this, dear listener. This movie came out along with the game. I mean, the game came out some months later, but the movie and the game are kind of meant to be like a come out together kind of production. Capcom were the ones who developed the game. And this game, also titled Sweet Home, ended up kind of being the inspiration, if you will, for Resident Evil. Here's a quote from Shinji Mikami, who is like the Resident Evil god, essentially. We were in Capcom's Osaka development studio, and my current boss, Tokuro Fujiwara, called me in to talk to him. He said that he wanted us to make a horror game using systems from Sweet Home, which was a horror game from the Famicom that he directed. I was actually a big fan of Sweet Home, and he was someone that I really respected, so I was excited about the project from the beginning. Now, none of us, I think, have played Sweet Home. Famicom is Super Nintendo in Japan for you non-enlightened ones.
Is it Super Nintendo or is it Nintendo?
Famicom's Nintendo, Super Famicom. Oh, shit.
Right.
I said Famicom. Sorry.
Yeah.
Famicom is the NES for those
Right.
unenlightened. Super Famicom is the SNES. So, while having not played the game, we have seen the movie. Do you see any elements of Resident Evil in this movie?
I see a bunch, not in terms of like there being necessarily a huge police presence, but I think the fact that they are in this big ass haunted mansion where things go awry at every turn and having a really menacing sort of atmosphere itself really played a huge part in that. I think that's probably the biggest influence. The only other influence I could see is maybe the characters, but that's much more of a stretch because the cast of Resident Evil 1 is a far cry from this. The only similarity that they would have is that both casts are, I would say, arguably mostly just caricatures and archetypes, but more so towards caricatures than anything necessarily academic.
I would say that maybe the game itself was the bigger kind of inspiration there. And I actually spoke to an amateur video game historian who told me
Oh yeah, Bonner?
they were originally going to do a 3D remake of Sweet Home, but they ended up going with the Resident Evil idea instead. Because Sweet Home, when it came out, I think was interesting for the time. You had 5 characters, and basically they could die. And the game would keep going, even if your characters died. So it had 5 possible endings, which for a Nintendo game, that actually sounds pretty intense.
True shit.
I'm not too well versed in the Resident Evil franchise. I mean, I know a decent amount about it, but I've never like really seriously played any of the
Mhm.
mainline games before. But what really jumped out to me was the end of the movie with when the big bad goes kind of crazy
Mm-hmm.
and we get sort of the more grotesque figure. That looked like a Resident Evil boss to me.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
like she gets all like kind of crazy, and then like these like baby faces kind of start like coming out of her neck and all this kind of stuff, and that was just straight up Resident Evil to me.
Yeah, some real T-virus shit.
Yeah,
Agreed. And dear listener, don't you dare doubt Dan's cred, because
Moira.
we've played Revelations 2, and me and him at like 1 a.m. shouting about an invisible bug that no one can see is
Also-
pure.
Probably very very well inebriated when we were doing that.
It's wild. So, needless to say, wild times abound. But I will say, for me, I think that the major thing is the key. When the key didn't work, I was like, motherfucker, I knew it was going to work.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Classic Resident Evil fare. Now, next up, I want to ask, as a haunted house joint, because we've seen a bunch of haunted house movies at this point, including Houseu. So where does this like stand? You know, is this a good haunted house movie?
I'm kind of torn with that. I think on the positive sides, I like the backstory as a good haunted house backstory of, mom accidentally incinerates child, and then she
Like
goes
you do.
crazy. It just happens. Then she starts incinerating all the other children, and then whoops, she killed herself too. I like that sort of setup for the haunted house.
Right.
And I like some of the stuff that happens. But that being said, one, I don't think there's enough haunting stuff going on in the house.
Uh-huh.
And two, a lot of it doesn't make sense to me. Like one problem that I had was I thought the ending was a little lame. And I'll tell you this back in a minute, I promise. But I thought the ending was a little lame because Emmy gives the mother spirit the child.
Right.
And then the mother spirit is like pacified and okay, we're all good. But they gave her the child like 2 or 3 times previously.
Yeah.
So like what? The only thing I could think of is kind of comical because the previous times they give her the child is still in the coffin thing
Mhm.
that nobody can apparently get open. So I'm just wondering if the spirit couldn't like open the coffin and needed somebody else to open the coffin for her. But aside from that, I was like, I don't know, that's kind of lame, I think. But to answer the question, I guess I'm on and off with how well of a haunted house story it is.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. In my opinion, Dan, I agree a lot with what you're saying. And the thing is this, let's not forget, the ghost is fucking evil.
Yeah.
Like, the mom somehow didn't realize that her kid, who was like walking age, was like in a fucking incinerator. And then she incinerates her kid. And then in a rage, she starts kidnapping children to incinerate them. And then all of a sudden we're given this like redemption arc almost where she like gets the baby and then she's bathed in this golden light. And I'm just like, nah, they should have to burn that bitch again. Like, she didn't die good enough the first time, I guess. Because, yo, she's evil. That is an evil ass spirit, bro. There's no redemption. No, you're a mother too. You should understand. Like, nah, man, this ain't about being a mom.
You want to know what's funny?
What?
This is the second time we've reviewed a movie where a mom accidentally incinerates her and multiple children. Can either of you remember what it was?
Oof. Refresh me. I don't know.
El Orfanato.
Oh, shit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The keys. Yeah, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember that shit.
There was a lot of parallels between these two now that I think about it, which is weird.
Yeah.
I think it works well enough as a haunted house. I will I'll be honest, the whole lore building aspect of this is a little contrived, and we don't get nearly enough of an explanation as to the intricacies of like exactly what's going on here, I think. But I think it I think it makes up for that with the general sense of dread that the house exudes. That and the fact that I guess just going in and out of it causes you to just be electrocuted or some shit, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, it's not electrocution though. It's incineration. And that threw me for a loop for a while because I was like, wait, dude, I thought he got electrocuted, but then he started burning and I was like, what the fuck is going on? But now I know for certain. And I guess to round things out, did you have a favorite scene? And why was it, Dan, your favorite scene where you watched a man turn into a skeleton?
Actually, that wasn't mine. It was the other one when Rio gets incinerated in half. That was my favorite one.
That shit was in not slow motion, but like that took a while.
It did.
Yeah.
It did.
And at the start, he kind of just like stayed there. I'm like, my guy, move.
Yeah. The reason why I like that one over the skeleton one is that one to me was, I don't know, just cooler. The skeleton one, this is probably not doing the movie justice, and I understand that. But I feel like that whole like sped up, decaying, dying person thing happens in a lot of 80s horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen it plenty of times before. So it was still cool, but I wasn't quite as not shocked. But like I said, I've seen it before. But the incinerated in half, yeah, I've seen similar, but I thought it was a slightly different take on the similar things.
That was also my favorite scene. And I'll say one thing that I really liked was he's like crawling through the hallway cut in half. And he's like, take me with you. And she's like, no, and fucking like kills him with a wrench. I'm like, oh my God. You killed this man. He had such high defense. He survived being cut in half. Look what you've done. So that was my favorite as well. Nico, is that your favorite too, or you got something different to add?
My favorite was the one where Yamamura just kind of disintegrates, but I'm going to give a runner-up to the scene where I can't remember who it was exactly. It might have been Kazuo, but one of the film crew just inexplicably brings this fucking massive halberd into the room with them for no goddamn reason.
That was Rio.
Okay, yeah, Rio. Other than to set up, hey, someone's gonna die to this later, wouldn't you know it? And then Asuka gets fucking axed in the face because of course she does.
The best part is he was like trying to show it to her and she didn't want to look at it.
Yeah. So that was just a little ridiculous and very silly.
Yeah, that was kind of random, right? Like, guys, look at this crazy ass axe I just fucking found down the hall. I mean, this shit is huge.
It's like showing off a really big stick you found as a kid, but, you know, a halberd or some shit. A polearm, something heavy.
Let me just stand it up very precariously in the corner. Nothing bad will happen here.
Surely no.
Sorry, audience. I just unlocked a core memory because of something Nico said.
Oh, yeah?
Yep. The middle school movie?
Oh, no.
High school.
High school. Oh, it was
Yeah.
high school. Yeah, of course.
Back in high school, Nico, Dan, and I were in the same math class, and we had to do like a math movie. So, by the way, this is worthy of a review, but in our movie, Saddam Hussein created an army of vampires.
Yo.
And it was okay. We had 2 brown people on the cast. This passed the test. So basically, Nico was a vampire at this point, and we went into the woods like near my house, and we just had to find like the biggest stick possible to hit someone with.
Yeah.
And we found it. But then I was like trying to do that, and then I'm supposed to like hit Nico with it, and then I do, but Nico like overpowers me and bites me. And in the actual cut, I'll never forget, I thought it got edited out, but it didn't. Like, he bites me, and then I just stop. Like, in real life, like Justin goes, nah, he bit me. No, he really bit me. And then like in the middle of class, they play our movie. And then one of my friends just started cracking up and she couldn't stop laughing.
I really
math
did
teacher-
bite him.
Yeah. I was like, what the fuck? Like, there was no acting in that. Like, I hit him with the stick and he bit me for real. Like, listen, I'm telling you, sometimes you gotta take a couple bumps to make a horror movie, I guess. Either way, man, let's take it to the what would you do. And I'll say this. I had trouble coming up with this one in particular because obviously we're not going to no fucking haunted ass mansion.
Nope.
But if you had to come up with an alternate method to defeat the demon or the ghost, what would you do as an alternate way to defeat the demon?
Arson. Burn the entire goddamn house down.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's real effective. If there's nothing to haunt, it's gone.
I feel like they actually did the method that I would have thought of, and it wasn't effective. But I would have reburied the dead child and then like rebuilt the stones.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just would have left after that. But
Isn't that the way that you're like supposed to get the good ending in the first act of The Witcher 3 with the Baron's kid?
Not quite, but close.
Mm,
You do rebury, but at the hearth or household or something like that.
yeah.
And that's how you get a good thing,
Shout out to The Witcher 3. Great game.
not a bad thing. Dan, for more information, Dan actually did on one of our folklore reviews, he reviewed a creature that was very similar to it, like the evil version.
I'm also almost done reading all the books.
Ah,
Hell yeah.
look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, never forget, Dan chose to have a monster that was like a baby-headed crow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fuck that.
I did.
So as far as I go, I would say that probably I would bury the baby on like consecrated ground, like a real graveyard and not just like in the yard randomly. And then I would find the mother's bones and then burn them again or like dissolve them or do something. But she can have no tie to the house anymore.
Also, how the fuck did she not know her baby was buried? Like
2 feet away.
yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Agreed. Let's take it to the critic review. And this doesn't have a Rotten Tomatoes, but it does have an IMDb. Why don't you guess?
I'm gonna guess 68.
I'm going to
Okay.
go further away from him just to ensure there's no way possible for us to get another tie, but I'm going to say something like very middling low, like 54.
You tied.
No, he didn't.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Yes.
Not fucking around, bro.
I swear to God.
On IMDb, this has a 6.5 out of 10, or to put it in our ranking system,
Okay.
it's got a 65 out of 100. So, Dan,
Okay.
you were pretty close. Pretty close.
Yeah, it was.
But I really want to know, what's your take on it? What would you give this movie?
I thought this movie was fine. I do think that there's some issues that I have kind of brought up a couple times. I think the discordant sort of nature of the film kind of threw me off a little bit. I think that stopped me from enjoying it more. I think if it wanted to be campy, I would rather have it leaned more into campiness like Hausu did, or if it wanted to be more serious, lean a little bit more towards that. Not saying that it can't be a combination of both. I just didn't think that the split was quite what I was looking for. But all in all, it was fine. It was still an enjoyable watch. I'm going to give it a 70.
I'm honestly not too far away from you there, Dan. I give this film a 72. In addition to everything you've said and what we've talked about, I think the film's biggest issue is pacing. It's an
Yeah.
hour and 40 or so, which is fine, but I wish they'd spread out the deaths a little bit more. And I thought the deaths were cool, but they happen and then there's like a whole 40 plus minutes where no one else dies. And that's the end. That's where you want to have the cool stuff happen, you know? So, in my opinion, having a bit more of a body count, even if there were more characters to die, maybe the people from the village come looking for them or something. I don't know. I thought that would have been cool. But 72 for me. It's still a decent watch.
I am basically there as well. I'm going to give this a 73. I really liked this, and my enthusiasm might make it sound like maybe I was going to put this higher, but I think there are definitely problems with this, and for what it's worth, you know, like YouTube cut aside, there have been better made movies both in this genre and in this decade that we've watched, and I recognize that. However, I still had a really, really great time, and I think more people should check this out.
Indeed. So, is this one going to get a recommendation from us?
I would recommend it, yes.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I would as well. Not like a hearty recommend, but a recommend. But definitely not no golden seal, though.
Nah.
Indeed. So there it is. There's our lecture on this movie. There's our star-studded cinematic review. But now, dear listener, it turns to you. If you like what you've heard, hit us up. We're on X and Instagram at DOTD Horror. Plus, we're on Facebook. Don't open that door. If you like what you've heard, dislike what you've heard, or you want to say something to us, hit us up. Plus, if you like and share, it helps us spread. And that's always good. Like peanut butter over bread.
Just enough bread.
Just enough bread. Not scraped too thinly, though.
Yeah.
Never that. So, yeah, until next time, dear listener, be careful if you go exploring any haunted mansions. Just don't do it, is our official stance. Look out for one another. But as always, dear listener, don't open that door.